career in data science almost a decade ago, there was no such platform to connect, right? So it's a great opportunity for us to interact and share ideas. May I please request all of you to please give a big round of applause for all the organizers for AIM, please. So today we'll be taking up supply chain optimization as the topic. We'll be covering few areas around that, how we actually integrated different data science modules to create a composite AI solution. We'll be also walking through a little more details around optimization itself, what kind of algorithms we have used and how does those algorithms work, what is the logic behind those algorithms, and also we'll have a small activity as well, just to kind of see how complex those optimization algorithms are, and then we'll open up the floor for Q&A. Right? Do we have the presentation? Of the session based on the theme for Cypher 2022, that is, the future is here. So we'll just play a small video, you'll understand what I'm talking about.
Command, I'm getting an alert. It appears we have insufficient inventory to fulfill the incoming order.
Production, what's going on?
We're predicting schedule changes due to unplanned weather conditions.
Analytics. Forecast show a storm hitting in 24 hours. Social listening confirms the traffic. Sensitivity models are predicting asset downtime due to flooding and workforce limitations.
Delays in delivery of raw materials could cause capacity loss of up to 26%.
Production, what can we do?
Running alternative production scenarios now. Our best option is to add capacity at the Northeast plants. An overtime shift would meet demand at positive margin impact. The problem is raw material inventory is too low for additional production.
Supply, if we did go into overtime, is there anything you can do to get the raw materials there in time?
Scanning inventory positions in storage and in transit. I've got raw materials on my way, but 5 days out. Wait, there's material in a warehouse we can get there in 2 days if we ship by it.
We've got good window on that route and 150 knot tailwind, which will save on fuel.
If we got raw materials in 2 days, we could make the order on time and stay within margin thresholds.
Exceptions. Can we make this call to go into overtime to divert materials?
Verifying this is within our tolerance to make a decision automatically. Command, we're good to go. No need to escalate to the supply chain plan.
Okay, digital supply network. Let's do it.
Like I said, the future is already here. Right? So, like you saw, the entire crux of this concept is the digital supply chain. Right? And that's how it enables for us to do data science and also use AI to make the entire supply chain more efficient and a lot less, a lot less cost. Incurring a lot less cost, right? So, like I said, we'll be covering topics. These are the topics that we'll be covering. We'll talk about a little bit of history of the oil and gas industry. What has happened over the past and how the industry is as on today, and what are the kind of disruptions that happen in this industry, and because of those disruptions, what are the kind of challenges that come up, and how does data science help in addressing those challenges, and ensure that we have a smooth supply chain for oil and gas industry. So we'll go into the history. I know this is a data science workshop, but we are touching upon history a bit. So please bear with me on this. I'll try to make it as interesting as possible, right? So if you see on the entire globe map, you will see that there are few countries only that are capable of providing oil or capable of supplying oil to the entire globe, right? Now, out of this, we have the sanctions on Russia. We have a very difficult situation with Iran, and then of course Venezuela is also out of the picture because of the UN sanctions. Right now, with these kind of constraints, what happens is there are a lot of disruptions that arise because of this. Sometimes there are difficult negotiations that happen on price, which leads to a very volatile price situation. So price fluctuations that leads to fluctuations in the demand, and that also translates into high overhead cost and very lean margins, right, across the supply chain. And to add to this, you have the infrastructure issues, uh, like railways, road, airway. So you have those constraints on the infrastructure part as well, which makes it even more difficult to ensure that the supply and the delivery is maintained in an efficient manner. So how do we address all these different challenges? Is it even possible for us to, kind of have a very efficient supply chain system? And where does data science really play a key role in all of this? Right? So let's first understand what are the kind of disruptions that happen. I'll request my colleague Dwaipayan to explain what are the kind of disruptions, what are the kind of challenges that come because of those disruptions.
So I will first speak about how basically the supply chain is affected by all the problems that we are facing and all the challenges that we are facing. I hope I am audible to everyone, right? So first thing is we had, if you see the price graph or how. So Saudi Arabia and countries like that are basically keeping the supply at a stable pace and at a stable level as well. So we are not increasing supplies. I'm not speaking about the multimodal supply chain optimization that can be done for the forward integration, so how it can reach to our ports and stuffs like that. There are a lot of geopolitical constraints that we would not be speaking about in lieu of the time that is given to us. But we would speak about specifically backward supply chain, how the genetic algorithm can help, how forecasting can help, and how we can basically reduce ullage situation. Ullage is basically when your tank, there are two types of tank in India, if I have to be very specific in India scenario. So there are tanks which are about 15,000 capacity and 22,000 capacity. So 15,000 capacity would be filled up by a single truck. So truck sizes normally range from 15,000 to 20,000. So we had to plan for which truck will go to supply at which RO. So RO can be a Dodo, Coco, and a Comco. So Dodo is basically dealer operated, dealer owned. So their controls are little lesser. Whereas the Coco and the Comco, Coco is basically company owned, company operated. So there we have a much more flexibility in terms of how things are basically operated, when we can supply. There are IoT devices as well. So we will speak about those in very brief, how they help us optimizing the supply when the inventory and the triggers are basically done. And then we have a Comco. Comco is basically the same, just managed and operated by the dealer. Company owned, managed and operated by dealers. So that's the basic of how oil looks like. So oil from an RO perspective and from an oil and gas marketing company perspective. So we'll go to the next slide. How an analytics can help. So analytics can help the business basically reduce ullage. So the case study we would be speaking about is for an oil and gas marketing company in India, based out of India. So we have reduced the ullage margin by 25%. And what it accounts to basically is cost savings and also savings from people going into a separate OMC. So in India, we have three OMCs majorly, HPCL, BPCL, and IOCL. So IOCL has around 34,000 ROs. HPCL 16,000 and BPCL has around 10,000 or 12,000 ROs. So in all, they supply about 85 to 90% across India's supply chain with MS and HSD. MS is basically motor spirit and HSD is basically high speed diesel. Uh, so there is an immense potential to basically optimize. Now, India stands at number 44 with respect to logistics. So when we speak about logistics, as what should I say? As an analytics, what should I say? Analyst space which can be optimized. So yeah, India stands at 44, and Germany is the top one, where you have less wastage when we ship anything. So India's 16 to 17% GDP is basically wasted just for so problems with the logistics, warehouse we not getting warehouse, or things which are not very transparent, right? So there is a push from the ministry as well. So there is Gati Shakti and then there is NLP as well, right? So NLP is National Logistics Policy, which basically aims to reduce our logistic losses from 16% to 10% in next 3-4 years. And the main thing that they have done is basically digitized all the departments. So let's say customs, transport, then you have finance, all the departments coming together, and you have an increased transparency. So there is a lot of action going on in this supply chain space. So I'll go to the next slide. Now we'll quickly speak about the case study. So what is that we have done? So this area where we basically say about supply chain disruptions with respect to geopolitics, we are not touching upon that, but we are touching upon the on a backward integration. So we are speaking about genetic algorithm forecasting to basically at a RO level, how did we do it and what are the steps that we have taken. So I would ask, so forecasting is the first one, right? So first is how we have done it. So we have first clustered stores. So there are stores which are, so let's say a store in Guwahati versus a store in Delhi. So even the last performing store at Delhi would be selling much more than a store in Guwahati, right? So how do you do it? So we had to cluster stores basis how much sales they did and how fluctuations were there. So we had to create two-fold clustering. So first is, let's say if there is cluster, we had some dealers which have very high variance. So if there is a high variance supply, so there are some dealers which do not report properly. So, and there are dealers who report it at regular intervals. So in case they don't report it properly, so you would have a high fluctuating curve. So for those type of dealers, we had to mark these are the dealers where we might need to look at, right? Then there are Coco Comco dealers, then there is no problem. So we have information at a Coco Comco level. But for majority of dealers are Dodo dealers, so which are dealer operated, dealer owned. So on they don't have the obligation to report it at a daily level or weekly levels. And supply is basically, if I consider an average ticket size, so daily ticket size is around 5,000 liters. So with my tank size of 15,000, it's 3 days in advance, right? So we had to not only predict accurately at each level, so we also had to, for this solution to be implemented, we had to be very spot on with each RO at each RO level, right? So that was the deal with us. So we classified them into high, medium, and low selling stores. So low selling stores have irregular behaviors. They reported data on an irregular basis. So these stores were very difficult to basically predict. So on these type of stores, what we did was we had a threshold based forecasting. So what it did was, whenever the threshold reached to a certain level, we changed the forecast technique. So it may be, let's say, an ETS first instance, and then it changed to a halt winters or something like that. So it changed. And then for a medium or a high store, so for a high store, it was consistent. So we had a bulk of algorithm written to basically predict these high stores, where the demand is consistent and supply can be made available, right? So that's the first one. And second one was also pretty much consistent. Low had two types of stores. So there were stores who reported infrequently, and there were stores who were basically very new to the business. So there were stores getting attached to, let's say, HPCL or BPCL. So there were stores like that as well. Then we forecasted for two types, so petrol and diesel, so high speed diesel and motor speed. Then we computed the requirements at each RO level, and then we moved into route optimization algorithm, which was a hybrid on top of it, and we created an optimized supply planning situation with demand, how much demand is there, how much the tank needs, and we increased the efficiency by 20-25% across all ROs. So ROs were in Delhi or something like that, so we had around 10-15% lesser ullage, but states in northeastern states where the demand and supply is little irregular, so we had a much higher baseline, right? So I would ask Vinay to basically take to the forecasting piece, and then I will speak about genetic algorithm.
So, like Dwaipayan mentioned, right, the kind of complexity from a demand forecasting perspective was immense. Just because we have to, forecast at a daily level, right? Daily level plus the kind of volatility that is there in the demand, the volatility on the prices, the volatility in the market. So it's a very, very complex set of model that had to be built, and there was no way to actually fit one particular model for all the data. In fact, for the same retail outlet and for the same product variant, let's say high speed diesel, even for that you could not actually fit a single model. So we had to actually fit two set of models or more than two set of models to capture the entire volatility or capture the entire variance that is there in the history, right? So how we went about, so first of all, the data sources that were available for us were the ERP system, where we were getting the daily transaction data, then a few Excel files which had few inputs which were all manual in nature, which is bit of structured, bit of unstructured data, and then also some advanced planning systems where we were getting some more information, and some external data sources like the Bloomberg website for the price information, right? So we used all of this data, first of all, to create a 360-degree demand view, what we call as a single single source of truth, which basically combines all the historical data plus all the causal factors that are impacting that demand across different location hierarchies and product hierarchies. Okay, so it's actually one comprehensive table, which is going to have all of this information. You can aggregate, disaggregate on this information and do any kind of data analysis. Then what we did is we looked at identifying at what level of hierarchy we should forecast, because like I said, there's a lot of volatility in the data. So you need to actually figure out what is the best level that you can forecast so that your accuracies are very good. Now this is again a very complex exercise, because if you think like on location you have like, let's say 4 hierarchies, on product you have another 4 hierarchies. It is actually 2 to the power 8 combinations that you have to kind of test out, right? So there are different techniques to do that. One of the techniques that we have used is to basically identify what are the different set of time series parameters that are impacting or that we can see or observe in the historical data. So what are those parameters? So one of the parameters is the sparsity. How much of data is actually having a lot of zeros, right? Zero demand or zero sales. The second is the coefficient of variation, which is basically a proxy for your volatility. How volatile is your data? So one day you're selling 10,000, next day you're selling 100, right? It's a huge variation that is there. And third is basically intermittency. So the difference between sparsity and intermittency is, in intermittency, you're basically looking for the occurrence of zero. So how, after what time gap are you looking at, are you seeing zero sales, right? So is it like after 2 days, after 3 days, after 4 days? Whereas sparsity is talking about the percentage of zeros in your data, right? So the last one is in fact the length of the time series itself, right? So some of you or most of you might be already aware that you need a certain amount of data to input to your time series algorithm or any kind of machine learning algorithm to have a at least a decent level of prediction, right? So if you have less number of data points, then it's very difficult for any algorithm to identify any kind of patterns and predict, right? So it will be like garbage in, garbage out, right? So looking at these 4 parameters, we identified or we ranked the hierarchies which are the most suitable for forecasting and where the probability of getting a high accuracy is good, right? So once we identified that, the next set of activities was to kind of do a segmentation. So now that I have identified what are the kind of hierarchies that I need to consider for my forecasting, the next is to forecast for a particular segment. So how do these segmentations work? So again, these segmentations are not like your business or rule-based segmentation. These are actually statistics based segmentation. The algorithm that we used was basically dynamic time series wrapping, where you basically segment those time series which are similar in nature in terms of their patterns, right? So for example, all those patterns or all those time series which behave in a particular way or which exhibit a particular kind of seasonality will get clubbed or grouped under one segment. Similarly, all those time series which have a very stable demand, they will get grouped under another segment. So it's basically a segmentation that is based on the time series behavior of those different data sets or data points that are there. So once we have identified all these segments, we went about going with different modeling approaches for each of the segments. So for example, for the segments which are quite seasonal in nature, we went ahead with using ARIMA and ARIMAX, right? We were using certain causal factors, macroeconomic factors as well in our model to enhance the accuracies and try to capture as much variation as possible. So for seasonal kind of segments, we used ARIMA or ARIMAX. For the second segment, which was like very highly intermittent, we didn't use any causal factors there. We went with a cross-chain modeling method because that was the best for intermittent demand. And for few others, we used state space modeling, UCM, right? And there were another set of segments like Dwaipayan mentioned, which especially in the segment of the ROs, which are like which have which have not captured information properly in terms of their historical demand, the low class or the low bucket set of retail outlets. There we went with the threshold models where we had to use a combination of models, right? For those aspects where there is sufficient information, we used Holt Winters. Where there was no sufficient information, we used threshold models. So we use a combination approach there. And how we did this model validation was, so given the business constraint that you need to forecast 3 days before, right? Because your tank capacity is 15,000 liters. That means on an average, if you say that the average demand on a daily basis is about 5,000, then you know that in 3 days, the tank is gonna go stock out, right? So because of that business constraint, you had to forecast, or we had to forecast 3 days in advance, which means our accuracies had to be 90 plus or 95 plus with a window of 3 days, right? So when we optimized our algorithms, we focused that our forecast models are giving the best accuracy for 3 days in advance kind of a horizon, right? And after that, once we had those models and we had validated the performance of these models, we also had to take into account what if there are some unforeseen situations where you will have to modify or adjust your forecast, right? Which means there are going to be scenarios, and we had to help our planners in such a way that they had the control on the forecast. So what we did is we also built a scenario manager which basically helps for simulate certain scenarios for the planners. They can say, okay, what if a particular retail outlet is out, or let's say there is some policy or there's some elections or there's some other event that is happening. What if that retail outlet is completely gone? Then what happens? Then that entire demand is going to shift to some other outlet, right? So for simulating these kind of scenarios, we provided specific enablers or inputs on the dashboard where they could simulate these scenarios and see how the forecast will change, and not only look at how the forecast will change, but also adjust that forecast and use that forecast for subsequent planning activities. Right? So all of this method that I just explained, it might appear it is very manual, but what we have done actually, which was an outcome of this work, was to actually make it into a productized solution. So a lot of our solutions we are showcasing at our stall in the ground floor. So if you are all interested, please, I would request you to visit our stall and understand our assets a little more. So this particular asset that we have developed for specifically for demand forecasting, we call it as iFocus. So if you are interested, please have a look at that at our stall. Uh, I will just hand over to Dwaipayan to walk you all through on the optimization piece.
So for what did we optimize, right? So first we had to optimize cost and the time taken. So first two things were time and cost. There were other methods as well apart from genetic algorithm that we could have used. We could have used a calculus-based models, the deep learning models. So we can also have used an XGBoost model. But what the problem it came up with is, so the client needed explainability, and most of the PSU would say which variable had given me what. So that's the basic question that we were stuck up with. And that's where we chose a genetic algorithm-based solution where we can speak about which routes is to be taken, which truck has to be sent across, and how this is going to help you for your demand fulfillment. So before we get into the genetic algorithm, I will just speak about the basic concepts of genetic algorithm and take it forward. So we have spoken about location clustering. So location cluster, one thing I forgot to tell is basically, so how did we do a location clustering? So we had lat and long of all the stores that were given to us, right? So we had the depots, the ROs, and with that RO, I knew which is a high selling RO, which is a low selling RO, and which are the ROs which needs a priority refill, right? Now, let's say 16,000 ROs. So 16,000 ROs, if I have to create a distance, so that matrix would be very huge, and I cannot calculate or compute the distances from all the ROs, right? So how did I do it? So what we did was we removed one decimal place. So 3 decimal places was what we had taken. 4th decimal places we removed off from the latitude information, so that all the ROs within 3 kilometer ranges comes under same group. So then we are left out with 5 or 6 ROs at max to calculate distances from, right? So the problem becomes smaller. So at each of these steps, we tried to make the problems as small as possible, right? So then we looked through which are the ROs which can be serviced at a same time. So let's say RO1 and RO2 so sits next to each other, we can service them together. Whereas there is an RO3 which is on the other side of the road, and it is a state highway. We cannot service it, right? So we would have to take a alternate channel or an alternate route. So we had to take so let's say 111 was the route that was chosen, and with let's say 15K truck and 20K truck, we had to choose some other truck or some other route for that particular RO. So I will go to the next slide and speak about how it worked. Okay.
We'll just do one activity. Maybe I'll request 5 volunteers from the group, please.
Primarily looking at the outermost nodes, let's say, and we have to cover those mandatorily, and assume that this is the shortest path, and then we look at the the deviation, which is like sitting outside the path, and then you see which is the closest node that's like the shortest distance from the remaining outer boundary, and then accordingly make that deviation.
Your good name, sorry? Please, big round of applause to all the volunteers. Thank you.
So if you see so what they had drawn, so let's say with 5, we have around 32 combinations. With 10, you will have around 1024, I believe. And with 20, if this nodes had to be 20, you would have around 1 million. With 21, it will go to 2 million plus 22, it will go to 4 million. So you get the drill, right? So it rises exponentially with the number of nodes that needs to be joined. So at a one point, your machine would be basically blown off. It won't work, right? So we need something to basically simplify the task and break down the task at each levels. So if we see our algorithm as well from a forecasting standpoint, we broke it down to smaller units so that we could at least come up with a good enough solution. It might not be the best solution, but it's a good enough solution. Chalega wo. So we go to, okay. So I will speak about few things about genetic algorithm, how it is basically done. So mutation, I will first take about crossover function. So before we go there, this problem is known in mathematics as a knapsack problem. So let's say you take a flight, you take the cabin luggage, you select from the various items that you had selected, right? So let's say you would carry your laptop, you would carry your power bank, you will carry few more things, right? So basis the value attached to it and the importance and the weight, right? The weight basically is 7 kilos. Beyond that, the airline will not let you in. And basis that you will basically select which are items that goes into your check-in luggage versus what goes into your cabin luggage, right? So genetic algorithm tries to do the same thing. So there is a fitness function that basically controls which goes into and which doesn't. Then there is elitism. Elitism is basically the what should I say? The strongest gets the next chance to basically go ahead with the mutation and pass it to the next generation, the next genes. Then we speak about crossover. So there is a single point crossover function. So single point crossover function is, let's say you have taken laptop, you have taken power bank, you have taken documents, right? So these are ones. Rest all, let's say there is a water bottle that you have left and there are few things that you did not take in your cabin baggage. So these will be 0. So it will be like 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0. And then at any point you will cut through and then see how these two parents basically create the next generation. So the next generation, is it better than the last generation or is it worse than the, if that it is worse, the fitness function will run again and you will basically repeat the whole process. So elitism I have spoken about. Tournament is basically which two parents above dudes get the chance here basically. So you have the strongest getting into the next generation. So we'll go to the next one. So how it fits to our problem, right? So how it fits to our root, how it fits to how the chromosomes relate to trucks and things like that. So I will speak about that. We'll go to the next slide. So let's say there are routes. So route is basically state highway plus national highway. Then there is a percentage, state highway is to national highway is to within city roads, that percentage is there. Then there is something as elevation. So elevation, if there is a huge elevation, we cannot send out the bigger truck. So which is a 20K truck or a 15K truck, you might not be able to send across, right? So that's was taken into account. Then there were weather conditions. This solution was implemented in 2020, and that was the time where the COVID had hit. So there were stores which were reporting, all of a sudden the reporting stopped as well. So we had to make deviations for those. So even though we knew there was a demand for certain stores at RO level, we could not send our trucks because the road was cordoned off or the area was closed off. So there were cases like that as well. If it was not a highway store within city stores, so this happened. So let's say for this case, so we have, I don't know how visible it is, but then I will speak. So let's say there are 3-4 trucks. So there are 4 trucks of this. We had to select which all trucks will go to the next generation. So we had 2 trucks that came through, and we had ROs at Mumbai, Delhi, and so this is Mumbai, Delhi, and we had a delay. Delay is basically how much time, average time it takes at different time of the day. This is a calendar that this data came through a Google API. So this was refreshed once every day. So they did not expose the API full day, but they had one query each day. So we had an average time at, let's say, 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock. What is the average time? 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock. This is the hourly report. Then we had a fitness function which spoke about minimum of the time and minimum of the cost, which is the best possible combination that we can get through. And then we took the route. So let's say route number 1, 3, 4, 5, and 4 was the route which had a fitness function of 32, and there was a delay of 13. Whereas if I see, there was Mumbai, Delhi. So Mumbai Delhi route, how much was the fitness function? 38, and the route number was 5341. And then you had a fitness function, lower fitness function of 29 for Mumbai Delhi. So we chose the route which had a lowest fitness function here. So which is Mumbai Delhi. So the route number is basically 3, 5, 1, and 4. So how did we come up with these route numbers? So these route numbers were basically given to us. So this was done for one petrochemical OMC. So what they had done is they have mapped whole India. They have split it in across road blocks. So let's say the route number 1 starts from A point to B point, which is like, let's say, Marathalli to Kundanalli, and so on and so forth. So that was the route map that we had got through. So we selected the route which had minimum of these, and then we selected what is the best one to select, which or else we will repeat the process multiple times. So this was a pretty simple solution which was given to our clients, and they had reduction of about 20-25% with respect to the cost that they have incurred. So we'll speak about next is basically where and all it can be used. But this can be also used for where we do not have any prior data, right? So there are designs, the system aided designs, or NASA had also created an antenna using genetic algorithm, which was quite weirdly shaped, but then that's what the best it came up with. But this can be used for designing, this can be used for other areas as well. But shipment is the area which we try to tackle, because there are a lot of scopes and avenues that are coming through, and we chose oil and gas because obviously there is a social cost to it as well, right? So we do not want our prices to be fluctuating every day, right? Inflation and all are related to oil, right? So the product is important, and the supply chain for this is very important for us. So that's why we chose this topic. So we'll ask Vinay to finish.
Yeah, so you can see that the art of possible of the same concept, the same framework, you can apply it to other industries also. So one of the application of this framework was for a manufacturing client, where we had another complexity of also predicting the commodity prices. So they need to procure the commodities, store the commodity, convert that into a finished good, then supply that finished good to the based on the demand, right? So you see the entire supply chain cycle there. So procurement, storage, planning, and then delivery, right? So for that, we also had one of our other solutions integrated, which is the commodity price forecasting. So we did a commodity price forecasting first, then we did a inventory optimization. We did a inventory optimization of the RM, the raw material, the commodity. Then we did a demand forecasting of the finished good, what is the demand for that, which again we used one of our solutions. And then we did an inventory optimization, and then after that we did a route optimization. So it's a entire cycle, which is basically a very good example of augmented analytics. And this is something that is going to be, like I said, this kind of solutions are going to be more in demand from different industries. And the same concept that that we have used for oil and gas can be applied even for finance as well, even for banking industry, for retail, CPG, healthcare, and e-com as well, with some customizations, of course, right? So the art of possible, or the scope for application of this framework of supply chain optimization is immense across different industries as well. So with that, I would like to conclude our talk. If there are any questions, please, we are open. Yeah, please go ahead.